SUI just quietly slashed its transaction times by over 30%. Now, as a SUI holder, I almost missed this upgrade, and believe me, it is a game changer for the whole network. Okay, let me set the stage. A little while ago, SUI wasn't exactly making a lot of headlines. This Layer 1 blockchain, it launched a few years ago, amid a lot of hype. I mean, remember the next big thing kind of buzz, right? But then they kind of went a bit quiet. Now, I bought some SUI tokens during a lot of that excitement, and for a while I did wonder if I had made the right call. You can fast forward to now though, and out of nowhere, I hear about a new upgrade called Mysticeti version 2. Now, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but that's kind of the thing with this. I thought was, what on earth is that? Is it a spell from Harry Potter or something fun? But no, here is the fun fact. Right? Mysticeti, I don't know if I'm saying it right or wrong, by the way, is actually a scientific name for a whole group of whales. So you can look that one up if you want to get the pronunciation and try to correct me in the comments. Hey, at least I kind of picked the mighty creature to name their upgrade after, right? Anyway, more importantly, of course, I did discover that this particular upgrade, the V2, isn't just a fancy name. It's actually a massive overhaul of how SUI handles transactions, and it's already making waves. Unintended. So you're probably thinking, what on earth is the big deal here? Well, in simple terms, SUI completely revamped its consensus engine. Now that's the part of the blockchain that decides how transactions actually get confirmed across the network. The Mysticeti Labs team, the core developers of SUI, basically merged an extra verification step directly into the consensus process. Now, before this upgrade, SUI validators used to do a kind of pre-consensus vote on each transaction to decide if it should even enter the network's ordering process. Now, that was like an extra kind of check post every transaction had to pass, right? And it made the system safe for sure, but it also added some more wait time. Now, this particular version 2 upgrade has eliminated that separate step. Now, validators and the consensus happen simultaneously and in one smooth flow. There's no more redundant pre-check cycling slowing everything down. So think of it like this. Previously, sending a transaction on SUI was a little bit like going through two airport security lines. One to check your ID and then another one to scan your bags. Now, with this upgrade, they combined it into a one streamlined checkpoint. So it's as if you show your ID and scan your bags all at once while walking on through, cutting, of course, the wait down. Now, the results here are that transactions, they get approval much faster because the moment that a block of transactions is agreed upon, each transaction in it actually has essentially been validated at the same time. Now, if a transaction is invalid, well, it just doesn't get through, right? It's tossed out immediately to avoid clogging up the network. Meanwhile, of course, all the valid transactions, they cruise ahead to finality without that extra pit stop. Now, this integration of validation into the main process makes the whole network more responsive. You'll see just how much in a second. There's another piece to this puzzle too, something called the transaction driver. Now, don't let the term scare you off here. It's basically a pretty straightforward concept and a pretty huge improvement. Now, before this version 2 upgrade, SUI used a Quorum driver for transactions. What it did was blast each new transaction out to all of the validators in the network, and then wait for a whole bunch of signatures from them before even starting to finalize the order of transactions. Now, it's kind of like sending a group of texts to 100 people and needing 67 of them, a supermajority, to reply OK before you proceed. It's effective, sure, but a lot of unnecessary chatter, right? Well, now, with the new transaction driver, SUI sends your transaction to just one validator to kick things off. If that validator acts kind of like, a decipher or a dispatcher, if you will, right? It quickly gathers the necessary approvals from the others and then certifies the transactions across the network. So by not spamming every validator up front, this method dramatically cuts down on the network bandwidth and the CPU usage. Plus, validators, they started doing something a bit clever here. They batch multiple signatures together inside the blocks. Instead of attaching separate signatures to every single transaction, basically in plain English here, It's the difference between receiving one neatly compiled report versus 100 individual emails. Essentially, it's less noise and it's more efficiency. Now, all of these changes, they sound great on paper, right? But you're probably wondering to yourself, how much faster and lighter is SUI now, really? Well, the early numbers are pretty impressive. Mysticeti Labs reported that with this Mysticeti version 2 and the new driver, the latency, the time that it takes for transactions to finalize, actually dropped by 35% on SUI's Asia-based nodes and about 25% on European nodes. Now that is a pretty huge improvement, right? To put it into perspective, if a typical transaction used to take, let's say 1 second on a node in Asia, well, now it's taking 0.65 seconds, over a third faster. In Europe, a transaction that might have taken 0.55 seconds is now down to roughly 0.4 seconds. And North America is seeing gains too, significant bumps in speed there as well. So we're basically talking about sub-second finality across the board here. Now this means that after you hit send on a SUI transaction, within less than a second on average, it is done, sealed, and final. Now let's just think about that for a second there, because you blink and it is finished. For comparison, on Ethereum, you might have to wait minutes or more for confirmation, right? And Bitcoin, you're talking an hour. So even fast chains like Solana, you're often looking for a couple of seconds or so. SUI is now approaching blink and you miss it kind of territory. Now that level of speed is not just a minor tweak here. It can fundamentally change the kind of applications that you can run. We're talking real-time games, high-frequency trading, instant payments. Those become more feasible, much more feasible, when your blockchain is just this quick. Now, speed, it isn't just about how fast one transaction confirms though, is it? It's also about how many transactions you can push through simultaneously without breaking things. Now here, SUI's new upgrade shines very well. The consensus model that SUI uses is built on something called DAG. That's Direct Acyclic Graph. That's the architecture, right? DAG architecture, which basically lets the network process many transactions in parallel instead of just one by one. Now, this upgrade, the V2, it takes full advantage of all of that. Now, according to SUI's team here, this upgrade, it boosts the network's throughput potentially to around 100,000 transactions per second under the ideal conditions. And yes, you did indeed hear that right. 100,000 TPS. That's getting into Visa level throughput territory, the kind of scale where blockchains can seriously start competing with traditional financial systems. Now, let's be clear, this is theoretical max, right? It's not like SUI is constantly doing 100,000 transactions per second right now in the wild, no. But the fact that the architecture can handle that kind of load is a pretty green flag for scalability. And thanks to the legacy and latency redundancies and reductions, we are actually talking about 0.4 second finality now. So we're talking 100,000 transactions finishing in under a second. Those high speeds, they are not just on paper. The network can actually utilize them in real-time scenarios now. In essence, SUI is shaping up to be both fast and furious, yes, pun intended, high transactional speed and high capacity. It's like they upgraded from a 2-lane road to a super highway and raised the speed limit all at the same time. Now, this one might just shock you, but I'm not a financial advisor, and nothing in this video is financial advice. Cryptocurrencies are highly volatile, and you could lose all of the money that you invest. You should always do your own research and consult a qualified professional. After all, your investments are entirely your responsibility, and you should know that nothing is ever guaranteed when it comes to investing. Neither I, this channel, nor YouTube are liable for any losses, and this video is for entertainment and educational purposes only. Alright, so disclaimers aside, I know that all this tech talk can feel a little bit abstract, right? Did these improvements actually make a difference for me as a user? Well, I decided to find out firsthand. Now, as a kind of retail investor, I am based in, Dubai at the moment, but, let's hypothetically say I was over in the US. The first thing that I needed to do was to get some SUI tokens into a wallet and then play with them, right? So I would give a bit of a shout out to my own crypto survival strategy here. I always keep accounts on multiple exchanges. Seriously, right? I'm that kind of person with a plan A, plan B, plan C when it comes to trading platforms. Why? Because you just never know when you're going to need an exchange because, your go-to one has suddenly gone down or frozen withdrawals or just suddenly stopped listing a token that you wanted to trade. So, in fact, not every exchange in the United States even lists SUI, by the way. So might have, a lot of people will probably have to have some alternatives to kind of find it. Now, I've made a bit of a habit here anyway of signing up, KYCing, and testing out a whole bunch of different exchanges as I reasonably can. Now, one time, a major exchange unexpectedly kind of halted withdrawals, and I wouldn't have been able to, trade. I would have been totally stuck if I hadn't had an account elsewhere, right? And ever since then, I spread out my activity across a few trusted different platforms. Now, by the way, if you are curious which exchanges that I personally use, then you should check out the link in the description to my website, where I link all of the exchanges that I personally do use. Now, on the website, those listed there are affiliate links. So if you do use them, it does support the channel here at no extra cost to yourself, but I did want to be very transparent about that. Anyway, what it does is it gives you a list of the vetted options that I do personally use, kind of like my plan A, B, C, and D. So forth, right? It's always good to be prepared. Now, with my exchange contingencies all in place, I'd have grabbed quite a bit of SUI over the years, and I did transfer just a little bit into a different wallet to test drive this new upgrade. So I sent a couple of test small transactions on the SUI network. One was a simple token transfer to a friend, and another one was interacting with a DeFi application on SUI to, say, let's add liquidity, nothing huge, just a routine action, right? And I was genuinely impressed here, right? The transactions, they confirmed so fast that I almost questioned if it had actually gone through, right? Now, I'm used to kind of hitting send and then, just then shifting my eyes to some kind of spinner or waiting for a notification or something, right? But no, this time I hit send and poof, the confirmation was done, right? It felt instantaneous. Now, I remember doing a double take at the Blockchain Explorer because there it was, already finalized. There was no pending state. There was no anxiety. Did I do that right? None of that. Granted, SUI's transactions were already fairly quick anyway beforehand, but this was on a whole different level. The experience just felt smoother and just snappier. I even chatted with a buddy of mine, also a SUI holder, on our Discord about it. Right? And by the way, if you love geeking out on all this kind of stuff, we do have a free educational Discord. The link is in the description, where we talk about all these kind of findings in real time. You can feel free to hop in and join the conversation if you want. It's a great place to learn and share tips with fellow crypto enthusiasts. Anyway, my friend was equally surprised. He's based in Asia, and he noted that the network felt noticeably more responsive for him too after this upgrade. It's one thing to read about a 30% or 35% latency reduction, right? And it's another to actually feel it when you're using the network. And we both felt it. Now, this got me thinking, all of the speed and efficiency is pretty fantastic, right? But is anyone actually using SUI enough for it to really matter? So in other words, how's the real world adoption actually looking? Well, here's where I stumbled upon something, or perhaps the most surprising part of this entire journey, really. While digging into the network stats, I discovered that SUI has been quietly booming in activity. Now, I'm talking major growth here. Now, according to the data from late 2024, after the V1, that is, the earlier version, that was actually implemented and other ecosystem improvements, SUI's usage did skyrocket. Daily transactions went from a few million to something like 8.4 million per day, a 153% jump quarter over quarter. And get this, at one point in early October 2024, SUI actually handled 58.4 million transactions in a single day. Yeah, 58.4 million in one day. Now, I had to do a double check on that one because it sounded pretty insane. Now, to put that number into context here, that is more transactions in 24 hours than many large blockchains handle in an entire month. Now, I mean, even now, right? Ethereum typically does on the order of maybe 1 million transactions per day, give or take, depending on the period, right? SUI did 58 times that on its peak day. Granted, every network's transactions can be padded by things like in-game transactions, microtransactions, maybe even spam or stress tests, right? But regardless of that, it shows that SUI's infrastructure held up to a torrent of activity without keeling over at all. Now, the network scaled effectively under high demand, which is a very, very bullish sign for the tech. It's not just anonymous transaction counts either here, right? The number of active users, or at least active addresses on SUI, has been climbing as well. In fact, the same quarter, daily active addresses jumped by about 35%, reaching roughly 875,000 active addresses using SUI each day. Now, that surge is largely thanks to SUI's growing DeFi ecosystem and the integration of native USDC on SUI. Yes, the official USDC stablecoin is on SUI now, which is also a pretty big deal. So when a major stablecoin and its issuer circle support a network, well, it tends to attract more DeFi projects and users because it makes moving money around much, much easier. Indeed, SUI's DeFi sector started gaining some traction, and the availability of USDC meant users, including those in the US like many others than they're watching this video right now, could actually bring liquidity into SUI without, convoluted bridging or using less familiar stablecoins. Now, we're seeing new decentralized applications from decentralized exchanges to NFT platforms popping up and expanding on SUI. The network effect is kicking in slowly but surely. That 875,000 active users figure kind of actually tells me that SUI isn't some ghost chain, right? It's alive and it is kicking. There is a community of users and developers actually there, doing stuff every day on this blockchain. And if the trend continues, that community is on a strong growth trajectory. All of this was a huge eye-opener for me. I went from thinking SUI was this underdog that might be falling behind to realizing that it's actually a part of a sleeping giant, right? This version 2 upgrade, it proves that the team is not only active, but technically brilliant in executing these kind of improvements. And the surge in users and usage shows that people are actually noticing, maybe not loudly on crypto Twitter just yet, but where it actually counts, on chain. Now, even some bigger players have taken note. Fun fact, a major asset manager, Van Eyck, actually launched a SUI exchange-traded note in Europe recently, indicating institutional interest in SUI's potential. When I saw that news, I was like, wait, what? Institutions are paying attention to SUI now? That's a whole other conversation, but it underscores that SUI is making the right kind of noise. As a SUI holder, I have to say that this feels vindicating. It's like being an early supporter of a startup that finally launches a killer feature and started gaining real users. There's a mix of pride, relief, and renewed excitement. Now, of course, I'm not going to get carried away into believing that SUI will conquer the world overnight here. There's some stiff competition in the blockchain space after all, and technology alone does not guarantee success. We have to see continued growth, developer engagement, and yes, a favorable regulatory climate, especially for those that are in the United States. But the trajectory here looks pretty good. SUI is checking a lot of boxes, cutting-edge technology, improving speed and scalability. We saw the 100,000 TPS claim and sub-second finality in action, growing adoption, millions of transactions and hundreds of thousands of users, and even institutional nods of approval. That's more than many projects can be, right, and boast about, to be honest with you. So, what's the takeaway here for you guys? Well, I think that this story of SUI's upgrade is a great reminder that in crypto, things can change in a blink. A project that that's out of the spotlight can suddenly come back strong with real improvements. That's why it pays to keep an eye on the fundamentals of things, not just the hype cycles, right? Now, I nearly missed this version 2 news, and it would have been an absolute shame, right? Because it genuinely does change how I view SUI's perspective here and prospects going forward. Right? It's a huge nudge to all of us that sometimes the most important developments are not the loudest. They're the code updates, the tech breakthroughs, the hard data of users on chain. Now that's the substance behind the scenes that eventually, inevitably, reflects in more visible stuff like token value and market perception. Though remember, nothing is ever guaranteed when it comes to investing. Now I've given my disclaimer, and I'll give you that common sense too. Do your own research, folks. For me, personally, I'm holding on to my SUI with a bit more confidence than I was before. Now, I'm also staying plugged into SUI's community and the dev updates here so that I don't miss the next big upgrade. In fact, this version 2 isn't the end of the road, is it? Right, the devs have hinted at further enhancements that are coming, like reducing the consensus rounds from 4 to 3 and enabling direct block streaming to nodes to make things even faster, if that was even possible. This train is still gaining momentum. Alright, so that is my story and take on SUI's big upgrade here. If you found this interesting or learned something new, then don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more. I really do appreciate you hanging out with me today on this particular deep dive into SUI, and hopefully I'll see you all in the next one.